Oh, there we go. Okay. Hello, and welcome to Friday with Fran. I'm your host, Shelly Kino of Shelly Kino IEP Consulting and Advocate. Every Friday, I get to chat with my friend Fran, and you get to come along. And we're going to cover specific topics related to kids who learn differently and or have specially designed instruction that results in an individualized education plan or an IEP. My experience in this area is over 25 years as a special educator in school systems. Fran's experience in this area is being a mom for over 20 years to two children who learn differently. And for the last 2 years, Fran herself has become someone who learns differently. Today, our topic is the IEP and something called a Section 504 plan. Hey, Fran, welcome back.
Hey.
How are you today?
I am doing fabulous.
Awesome.
It's a little rainy, but it seems to be the status quo for around here these days.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that because we needed a little bit of rain and it's dropped the heat down, which makes me very happy.
I understand that totally.
So before we get too far into our discussion today, I just want to give a brief overview of what an IEP is and what a Section 504 as well as the similarities and the differences between them. So both give legal rights to people with disabilities. Both provide help specifically to kids in grades K through 12. Both can provide accommodations and modifications to those students. They both have procedural safeguards to protect families' rights like access to school records. And they provide for impartial hearings when there's a dispute between the school and the family. They both can be taken to college, but there's a little difference between them, which brings me to an IEP is legally mandated to be a written document, while a 504 doesn't have to be. Typically they are, but not always. A 504 automatically guarantees accommodations for college students, while an IEP doesn't guarantee it, but the accommodations are usually provided if the student is proactive. An IEP provides specially designed instruction and related services to meet the unique needs of the child while preparing them for further education, employment, and independent living in K through 4. A 504 does not do that. An IEP can provide the same as a 504, but a 504 cannot provide the same as an IEP. So Fran, tell us about...
Oh, I'm sorry. It's I just feel so sorry as I'm listening to you read that.
Why?
It's alphabet soup.
Well, yeah.
To start with.
True.
I mean,
right.
it just, and that I love those definitions.
Well,
I wish I'd had those.
Well, and that's why I wanted to share them today, because there is a lot of confusion between a 504 and an IEP and what's provided in each and what's covered in each. And those were pretty basic definitions. There's definitely more to each one.
But it covered, I like that though, because it wasn't overwhelming. It was overwhelming, but not in such a way that there was no hope.
Yeah. And that's what I was trying to do, was just a brief synopsis. If you need more help with either of those things, call me and I can go into further detail. But for today's topic, I hope anyway that covered it well enough. So Fran, I have written hundreds and hundreds of IEPs. To be honest, I've never written a 504. In the school districts where I worked, the special education teacher wasn't involved in writing the 504s.
Really?
That's not the case everywhere. But in my case, it always was. So I know the differences, but I haven't had to really delve into what a 504 looks like. But I know you have told me that with your daughter, she actually had both.
Yes. And oh, hi, Alex is on. Sorry, I'm distracted. Okay. Chipmunk, here we go.
Hi, Alex.
Okay, I'm back. Here we go. Try again.
Allie had a 504
Yes, Allie 504.
and an IEP. So
yes.
So tell me about the differences that you experienced between them.
Oh, well. Okay. When I was told about a 504, and I'm not even, it didn't line up with what you said, actually. I was told that a 504 is only, is it okay if I say
Absolutely.
Kind of my understanding of a 504 when we started this with Allison was it's only for that school district. It doesn't go beyond that school district. Like if she went to a different school district, it would change. It wouldn't follow her. And that it was only suggestions. It wasn't law. It wasn't had to be followed. They were just guidelines. That's what I was told of a 504.
And to be honest, that was my understanding for the longest time too. It wasn't until the last, 10 years maybe, that I understood that they're both legal documents. And it's just that the 504 is under the it's its own act. It's the Section 504 Rehabilitation Act. Right. So it has its own guidance and its own procedural safeguards, where an IEP falls under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so they both have protections in them. The schools tend to have the same understanding that I had, to be honest, because that's where I got my understanding, was from the schools. When I went through college to get my teaching degree, I don't even know if a Section 504 was talked about. If it was so brief that I didn't remember it. So I think a lot of school districts are probably in that same boat, in the sense that they just don't utilize or understand the 504 as much as the IEP.
Okay. That's
so
fair.
Yeah. Not trying to defend, but at the same time trying to explain.
No, I'm fine with it. I have determined that I'm not going to get anywhere as an advocate for my children through the education system by making enemies.
Right. Exactly.
And it's best if we're all on the same page and trying to work. Ultimately, I know teachers want the best for my children, and I want the best for my children. Sometimes we aren't coming from the same direction, the same angle.
Right. Exactly.
So sometimes that does create tension and chaos, and sometimes heartache and hard feelings. But ultimately, I want us all to be on the same team. We're not opponents fighting each other to educate my child. So, what has happened in the past, that's in the past. And now I'm moving forward and I want to learn from it.
Yeah. And
is that?
Absolutely. And when I was teaching, I had a different thought process as far as the 504 and the IEP were concerned. And I also had a different thought process as far as what an advocate does and should be doing and should know, and what I felt my colleagues should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And now that I'm not teaching and I've had a chance to study some things more in depth than prior and really get a better understanding of some things, my perspective about stuff is very different than it was just 4 or 5 years ago. And
I think that's important for everyone to remember. Education is fluid, and standards are fluid. And if we're not fluid and we're trying to be concrete, we're the floodgate that does not allow education to happen.
Right. Yeah. And it's always good to learn, I mean, I know I have, teacher in my system, but I think that applies to everybody. It doesn't, as long as you're still learning stuff as you're getting older, I feel like you're still growing, and that's a positive thing. Because there's nobody will ever know everything about everything.
Really?
No sorry.
I have a teenage daughter that, she's not a teenager anymore, but did you hear?
Yes. I heard that. Yeah, I can say that about mine. She's not here. She thinks she knows everything about everything too. So, and she's the same age as your Allie. So, yeah, I understand that. yeah, I mean, there's so many things in the world that we can all learn about. So that was one misconception that I think probably we both had about the 504 is that it really wasn't as strong as it really is. Your school might have been correct. I'm not sure, like kind of like the IEP, it follows you to the next school, but they're going to write it so that it fits their programs and their standards. And not that it's that those things are written because of what's available to a degree, but that those things are written because maybe some schools have different curriculums or they have different things that they allow their students to have. You know, like maybe some schools allow students to have bottles of water, for example, throughout their day, and other schools don't. And sometimes bottles of water are written into 504s because the kid has whatever it is.
Actually, Allison had to have it written into her 504 that she can have water breaks due to health issues she has. She was not getting enough hydration, so we had to write it in there so that parents couldn't complain because she could and their children couldn't. But then also any child can in our school district have bottles that if they want to. Right. They just have to be clear.
Yeah. So I guess
that was pre-COVID, so who knows now, but
yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is technically they're right. It doesn't automatically follow exactly letter to letter as what they had written at their district, but it can still, it would have still carried on if you had moved to another place, just like the IEP. Because you should have, if you move to a completely different school district, you should have a move-in IEP meeting as soon as possible once moving into that district so that it is written for the style and the way that they do.
The IEP, but what about a 504?
Same thing. Same thing. 504.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So that you didn't get that version either, huh?
No, I didn't hear that either. But that's okay. It was actually I know with an IEP that you have to have certain diagnosis to qualify, and so the 504 tends to be that if you don't have those, that's why you get the 504 rather than the IEP. Am I? That's or am I? Well, is that another falsehood I've been?
My is because you use the word diagnosis. There are eligibilities.
Eligibility. Okay, that's the word.
Right. Because if you have a medical diagnosis, you don't automatically qualify for an IEP. And that's another misnomer out there is that, well, if my child is diagnosed with autism or ADHD, then they automatically qualify. No, they don't automatically qualify.
It's the level of delay.
Right. It's how it affects them at school.
Affects the education.
Yeah.
Process. So, and also I found it's how it affects the education. It's not how it's the home. It's not the home environment. It's the school. It's how you're affected at school.
Yes and no. I mean, the majority.
Okay, in my experience, that's what I was told. How's that?
Yeah. And in 2004, they added the words that I said just a few minutes ago about to meet the unique needs and to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. And even though that was put into the law in 2004, I really didn't know that was there. And that's for the IEP. That's not for the 504. But so it's even for things that are happening at home. Like you could get training. There's a section in the IEP, and it's federally mandated that if parents need training or if parents need counseling, that's supposed to be, that's supposed to be provided to them if the IEP team agrees and, all those other little fun things. But yes, there's a training section and there are parts in the law that, and again, I don't know. I didn't know that.
I'm gonna reverse back to my other child on this with what you just told me.
Okay.
He had early intervention. So
Mhm.
from the time he came home from the NICU, he had developmental therapy and all kinds of therapies.
Mhm.
And then he transitioned into early childhood
Mhm.
education. And so he had an IFSP,
Mhm. That's what you get before you get into school.
individualized family service
Mhm.
plan
Yep.
with early intervention. When he went into school, he had an IEP,
Mhm. Yep. We stopped.
individualized education plan.
Uh-huh.
And I was told when that happened, the family no longer counts and matters.
Yeah. And
That's what I was. That's why I looked at you when you just said that.
uh-huh. Again, and it's parts of the law that just are not utilized very often and not understood. And I'm not a lawyer. For anyone who's listening to this, I refer to the law. I I have had to deal under the law for over 25 years. I've been to rights law conferences to learn as much about special education law as I could. But whatever I say is not legal advice in the sense that you can take it to the bank.
Mm-hmm.
It is just that my understanding of the law, some case laws that have been out there support what I say in regards to these things. So I think just a lot of schools don't know what's all in the law. Because if I was to get, and I don't have it, I was looking for it. If I was to get just the special education law that is the IEP law, the book just for the one law is about that thick. So there are lots and lots of components to the law that either aren't learned or forgotten about or maybe hidden under the carpet on purpose. I don't know. But now that I've become an
So,
advocate, I'm finding
right.
these things out that I did not know.
Hence why it's so important to have people doing what you do.
Well, thank you. And that's why I started doing what I did, because there were things that I was like, oh, I don't know, this just doesn't feel right. And none of the schools that I worked for did anything illegal. But now that I am doing this, I'm seeing, okay, they didn't do anything illegal, but there was some more things that they could have done. And I want to help people, both school districts and families, understand that. I sometimes think, in my experiences, that maybe the schools were afraid to do certain things because they didn't know they were allowed to under the law. Not alone allowed, but almost mandated. Well, some things are mandated that, so I think in a lot of ways the schools would have done more if they felt like they could have. And I just don't, like I said, that law is so thick. And then that's just one. And then you have the whole just regular education law that has its own thick book. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect administrators to know every in and out of every piece of the law, because that's why you have lawyers. I guess that's their job.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's an interesting point that you make, is that it does start off as an IF, so we are including the family, and then it changes, but the family is still important. Like I said, in 2004, that changed. They didn't always have that in there. And so when you're
So
thinking,
maybe this was prior to, maybe this was when my son, this was right before.
that would have been right before, because he's older than my daughter, and she was 4 in 2004. So yeah, that would have been right before the law came out.
So
yeah.
But that was my experience with him. I took him to that assessment, and then I was told, and it was just like, it was an all-day thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm sure they looked at his physical therapy, his occupational therapy, his speech, or not his.
And do you remember how old these kids are when they do this? They transition from early intervention to early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
How old are they?
3.
Uh-huh. And you're asking them to do that all day?
Yeah.
Through nap and snack and lunch.
Yeah. And for anyone who is wondering that has never watched us before, Fran has a difficult time because of the reasons that she's now someone who learns differently. She had a stroke and some concussions a couple of years ago, and the part of her brain that was affected is the part that relates to numbers. And so sometimes she has to associate letters with numbers, and sometimes it helps her to see it versus to hear it, and she has to write the words instead of the numbers. And so I try to accommodate her and help as much as I can. I don't know if I am doing things correctly or not, but she always seems to get what I'm saying. So
it's all good.
Okay.
I have a good support system. People that
yes, you do.
We just get by.
Yeah.
They get me.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's what just as I have people that get me, I want people to get my kids.
Absolutely.
And that's, and ultimately, I think that's been my goal all along is I just want you to get them. I don't want you to enable them to do something that's inappropriate, socially unacceptable.
Right.
I want you to help grow them. I want them to become the best that they can become.
Right.
In who they are, not who I want them to be, because each of us have our own plan. God has a plan for each of us since before creation. So they have a plan for them, so I just want them to reach that.
Absolutely. And I think every parent wants that for their child.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if the child has special needs or not. I mean, everybody wants their child to be accepted. But I think it is more so for a parent of a child with special needs because our society does put limits on them and does set them to the side and not give them the same opportunities. So I'm trying to change that, trying to bring awareness. That's why I love the Friday with Fran, because, I have my experience from teaching, but a parent's perspective is so much different than a teacher's. And especially, a parent's perspective of a child with special needs is different than anyone else's. It doesn't matter if it's a teacher or an administrator or another parent that doesn't have a child with special needs. So I so appreciate
thanks. I appreciate it's I think it's given me, I enjoy it because it gives me an opportunity to share my experiences, and also you're growing me as we go through this. I'm learning so many things, and I think we're growing each other.
I think so, because it helps me understand from your perspective, and it helps me understand things maybe even from your kids' perspectives that I wouldn't have gotten before. I have a blog coming out. I'm in the middle of writing it, actually, about an experience that I just had this week. And it, I think, gave me a glimpse into the life of someone who has a specific learning disability, or even who has just some other things that cause them to learn differently, whether that's autism or cognitive delay or whatever. And so I'm not going to give it away. He'll have to go read the blog.
Man. But I'm sitting here waiting. I'm waiting.
I know. I'll put it out there. I was working on it this morning and just didn't get it all the way finished. But it was one of those things where I felt like, God is helping me understand others because I just went through this situation. And so maybe I can put words to what kids are dealing with that they can't put words to. So we'll see.
Kind of like the thing I wrote when I was in rehab following my stroke, things I learned on the other side.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I don't know how willing you are to share that with other people besides people but it was definitely eye-opening for me.
One day, maybe.
Yeah.
I wanted to share. I should share my cup with you one time. Maybe we should do that on a Friday.
Okay.
My cup story. Have I? I think I shared that.
I think you've shared that
Anyway,
with me. Yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely.
but
Yep. So yeah.
back
So we
to
talked about
Allie in the 504, or where are we?
yeah. I was just gonna say we talked a little bit about the 504 and some of the misconceptions between the 504 and the IEP and who's covered and who's not covered. So when she had the 504, sometimes some school districts will also let the student have, that's a weird way to say it, but the student will also have an IEP. Did you have that, or did she?
No,
Okay.
we only had, and it was a fight to get the IEP. I had documentation, but unfortunately, so much of our education system is based on test results and assessments. And sometimes the tester is not even given the leeway to make what they obviously see in front of them. They have to go off of the results. So
Right.
I don't fault the tester in any way, but Allison kept testing that she was able, as I watched her fall further and further and further behind.
Yeah. And that is something that has changed in the law as well. They're used to, and I don't know if it changed in 2004 or 93 when the other change happened, but the early part of the law, there had to be 2 years worth of failure in school before the child would be eligible for an IEP under specific learning disability or certain other categories. And at some point they took that out because they realized we're making these kids start with a huge gap.
And she actually did fail. She got help. She failed. They passed her. Well, let's just see how she does.
Right.
She didn't. So she didn't even make it to the semester, and we just took her back.
Yeah.
And repeated. And it shouldn't have happened.
No. And that's why they changed the law. But laws take forever to change. You know, you just can't go change it overnight. But the wheels of education move, I think, as slow, if not slower sometimes, than the wheels of law. So, yeah, I mean, our kids were affected for a long time.
Change is hard no matter what.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
It's just human nature.
I'm trying to think of the wording exactly, and I won't get it right. But having an IEP isn't necessarily for children to catch up to their peers. It's to help build up their strengths and then strengthen their weaknesses and get them where they're capable, with or without accommodations. And I could go on a whole rant about accommodations, and maybe that'll be another Friday.
Yes.
But basically, you and I are both having
I think we're going
the
to
most
have to
common accommodation in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody thinks us less intelligent or less capable because of our glasses.
Mm-hmm.
But when you ask some teachers or you ask society to put in a wheelchair ramp or allow a kid who learns at a different pace or in a different manner into their classroom and then let them have an A or a B that they've earned, but no, they don't earn that because they had help. Huge pet peeve of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally could rant for a very long time about that. So
I get it. And it is true because I think it's the filter, the lens through which we all look, which is even funnier since we're talking about glasses.
Yeah.
But the lens that we've grown accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
What you were taught when you went through school, when you went through and you got your degree, is such a different lens than what students in college today as they go through to become teachers.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm
So, I
hoping that they
mean,
get a lot more
that
education.
change thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. So something I want to make sure to say to our audience and to you, if this was never expressed to you, is that probably the main difference between an IEP and a 504 is a 504 provides accommodations and modifications. The IEP provides the accommodations and the modifications, but it also has the education piece to it. So they would, students with IEPs are also eligible for related services. So the speech, the occupational therapy, the physical therapy, those sorts of things are included in the IEP. And basically it's if the child is okay academically, and they just need a few accommodations and modifications, a 504 might be the better choice. But if they really need some specialized instruction, whether that's behavior, social, and then your typical academics that we think of, then they probably need to have an IEP, because that's where those kinds of things are going to be written into. So we went from Allie had the 504, and then you had to fight to get the IEP. What changed for her from having the 504 to having the IEP?
In her accommodations, you mean, or
Just in her education? And
what was perceived as recommendations had to follows.
mm-hmm.
That was the biggest change. I could send an email saying her IEP says this, we need to follow this.
Mm-hmm.
I was unaware that I could have sent it when she had the 504 and said the same thing. But I knew that I could ask for an assessment all the calendars. So that's what I did every prior to her annual review. I would say, I want to reassess. I want to reassess until she finally got the IEP. It was really a draining process, though.
Yeah, I'm sure
it was. But I think it was draining in watching her struggle and fall further and further behind, and knowing that we had the accommodations there already.
Right. And so you felt that you had similar accommodations, if not identical accommodations, from the 504 to the IEP, but they weren't necessarily being implemented with the 504.
No.
And that because you because you had the IEP, you felt you had more power
to push for it
and make it happen.
To advocate more.
Yeah. And technically they're equal in their power. But honestly,
right.
I didn't know that either. 504s, especially in our area, they're just not utilized or talked about all that much. So, a lot of times the 504s that I did see in my career were for more medical purposes. Like I said, if a kid needed a bottle of water for something, or they needed to, if they were to get headaches, that they would be allowed to go lay down, which it irritates me, but I understand the legal side of it. But it irritates me that we can't just go, you have a headache today, go lay down. That just seems like a human nature thing.
Right.
But at the same time, I know that, like you mentioned it earlier, that, you don't want to upset other parents because, so-and-so got to go lay down when they had a headache, and then you're going to have everybody wanting to lay down when they have a headache. And then what do you're going to end up with an empty classroom. And, those are things that we worry about as educators, whether or not they would really happen, who knows? But, they have to put those things in because people they judge and they don't know what they're judging. They don't have all the facts when they're judging. So,
look at today, even in today's situations, people are judging.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and you
Absolutely.
don't know. And I think I am so humbled through the process of my changing inabilities. I really thought I was advocating, and um, I thought the lens through which I looked was much more open, and I realized it was very tinted with my own life experiences.
And everybody is.
And
Yeah.
so it's, but I look at it now and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, Fran, did you really think that was really advocating for this person?
Yeah.
And so, but that's why I'm enjoying these chats with you on Fridays, because I get to share some of the things I thought were good things, and then I'm like, I'm on the other side, and I'm like, really, seriously? If I could talk to myself, then I'd be like, Fran.
Yep. Yeah. There's a line in a song, and I can't think of the song title, but it's basically, if I could talk to my younger self, would I tell them
Your
all the
younger
things?
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Would I tell them all the things, or would I just let them learn the way I learned? Because it's through all that learning that you are who you are today.
True.
And then that's how we help others, is because we use the things, the mistakes, the errors, our life experiences to help others. So, since our we're supposed to be talking about 504s and IEPs, and we are, and I see that my friend Linda, who is another master IEP coach, if I have said anything incorrect about the 504 or the IEP, please pop on and correct me, because I don't want to say the wrong things. But so with your son, you went from the IFSP to the IEP, and then I guess you felt excluded at that point.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
About the first IEP that was written for him, I didn't realize I could have a say in the goals. And some of his goals I didn't think were appropriate for him. And he carried them for that entire count,
Right.
School, all the calendars,
right.
So, and so then I had a fight throughout that year to say, when they're like, well, this is IEP goal. He's not going to pass it. It's inappropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good point. IEPs are living documents. They can be changed at any time. Parents, you can call an IEP meeting every month if you want to. If you feel that something isn't being addressed, or you feel that a goal is very inappropriate. I mean, with the goals, you have to give them time to show some effect. But
right.
At the same time, I mean, if you feel like you're not getting somewhere with your school district, the annual review, the law says that the IEP has to be reviewed at least once a year. It doesn't say how many times it can be looked at or changed. And again, that's something that wasn't really discussed to me, or that I really grasped a hold of, until after I went to some of my special ed law trainings. And then I was like, oh yeah, we don't have to have, and sometimes the meetings don't have to include the entire IEP team.
Right. And oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And sometimes it can just be a meeting between a parent and the teacher, and maybe the special ed director or a school, whoever is in charge of kind of implementing and making sure the IEP is followed. Sometimes it can just be a meeting between those people. But if anything changes in the IEP, everybody on the team needs to be made aware of it. And if And really the only way you can change something in an IEP is, and not have everybody there, is if it doesn't change everybody's role in the IEP.
Okay.
So, but yeah, you want to add amendments if you can. I've had parents that have told me, well, I've had conversations with my child's teacher and, you know, the school psychologist, and we all agreed that this should, A, B, and C should happen. And then 2 months later, A, B, or C never happened. And then the teacher said, oh, well, it was never written into the IEP, so I didn't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that you get those kinds of things written down, because if it is an IEP, it is, you got to do it.
And to add to that, specifically like the annual reviews, I will go home right away and go through the whole IEP, mm-hmm. because sometimes we'll be talking, and because as the years have gone on, you get to know everybody on your child's IEP team, because you do.
Right, exactly.
If they can, anyway. But so you get talking, and some things just inadvertently don't get added.
Right.
I don't think there's ever been anything not added because they chose to try not to add it, even though we talked about it. But so then they'll have to update it, mm-hmm. and then they'll send another one. But if I don't do it, then it's not in there.
Right.
And from experience, a time I had said, oh, well, this should be happening. And I was looking to IEP before I was going to, because I don't want to tell a teacher, yeah, it's in her IEP. Yeah, it's in his IEP, and it's not in there. So I always go back, and I have a huge legal file cabinet, much like the one that you can see beside me, that I would keep all their documentation in. So I would flip through, and that's how I discovered this was supposed to be in here. Why isn't this in here? Then I went back through all my communications, and I went through my notes, but I called them, and they were like, oh yeah, let me amend it. And then they communicated with my child's education team, and I didn't have to even do that part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But so that's awesome. I mean, I'm very blessed with, especially I would say junior high, high school, for a good majority of the teachers were spot on, wonderful, and believed that the IEP was not just an out to have an easy way. They knew what an IEP was there to help them reach their fullest potential, not as an easy way out.
Oh my gosh, that is huge.
But there were some, that saw it as, I had a teacher in an IEP meeting. She was the general teacher representative. Excuse me, my cat came to join us. Okay. And we one of my daughter's accommodations was that she could send her assignments in electronically and type them, because part of her issue is her writing is horrible and she gets distracted, and typing tended to keep her focused, and it made more sense of her use of her time. But they weren't getting to this teacher her assignments. Well, the school district had just within that year changed their email address, their whole system. It went from the long system to a dot. And my daughter had not updated her email addresses, so she was sending them to the old
email addresses.
But she was sending them.
Right.
But she was told in this IEP meeting by this teacher, technology is part of life, and if you can't, hold on, I want to make sure I say this correctly. Technology is part of life, and if you can't cut it, you're not gonna. If you can't do it here in school, you're not gonna cut it in life. That's what she told my daughter.
I've got some choice words I would like to say.
But I am so grateful that was not our entire experience. That was the exception. But I was flabbergasted.
Right.
But and I said, well, you're correct. Technology is part of life. It is way so much part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But we're here because my daughter is not managing life well without help. So we need to help her.
Yeah. And I mean, how many of us?
And so someone said, I will go through her emails and check them for her. We will do it together. They didn't say they would do it. They said, we will do it together. Perfect. And they did it right then and there in the meeting.
Yeah. And I mean, how many of us our emails, almost all of the emails are autofill. You start typing in one letter and it gives you options. And
right. Exactly.
Yeah. That I don't understand that kind of thinking where we want to blame the student when something isn't the way we expect it or want it to be. And we won't, I mean, and especially that, if they figured it out, that was the problem, it's not like she did it on purpose. And it isn't even, I mean, I'm just thinking about all the times that, I've changed my email address and I still get email, no matter the fact that I've told certain people a dozen times, don't use that one. I don't look at that account anymore.
What just happened right before we came on? What did I do?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. The link to this particular live stream, she clicked on the one from last week and it's not the same one from week to week. So,
and I got a text from you going, are you ready? I'm like, oh, you're not here. You're asking me where I am. I must be on the wrong stream. Let me try again.
Yeah. It's just, like I said, it's I don't know why people have that they just want to put the blame on everybody else. It's not my problem. You have to deal with it. It's you. It's you. And
but I want to end on a good note instead of a bad note.
Yeah.
Can we end on a good note?
Of course.
I don't like to be negative.
Yeah. Yep. So you're pleased that your children received help through their IEPs. Yes.
And I was pleased that they were flexible. As you said, you can meet. My son actually graduated late, not late. What's the other word? What's not late? What's the other word?
Early.
He graduated early.
Okay.
Because by his behavior, he was letting us know he was done.
Right.
We had that year, we had probably this many additional meetings with his team to go, okay, well, have we tried this? Okay. I mean, my plan had been for him, he should still be in school and in extended education.
Right.
But his plan was, Mom, I'm done. I am more than done. And he was letting us know in the only way he knew how.
Right.
So the positive was that everyone was willing to work and try to figure out, okay, what can we do? What do we don't want them just to graduate and then be left in no man's land. Right. Everyone was trying to have a plan.
Right.
And was willing to work and communicate. I mean, emails flying back and forth along with all these meetings. So that's why I want to end on a positive, that there are, when you have a team that works together, absolutely, you can do amazing things.
Yep. And I want to clarify, for anyone who doesn't know what Fran was just referring to when she said extended education, again, with an IEP, and this is a little different than a 504, an IEP will allow a child, to stay in school until the day before they turn 22. Some districts try to stop them when they turn 21 because the law says age 3 to age 21. But you're 21 for 364 days. So you get that whole time that you're 21, that you can stay in school. A 504 won't do that, because a 504, that it's just one of its limitations. But again, both of them, like if the child went off to college, that's a different type of education than the type that Fran is talking about. The type that she and I are talking about now is they stay within their high school community to have this extended education until the day before their 22nd birthday.
And that's what my daughter's doing now.
Yeah.
And
So
then, did you see what Alex said?
So the key is to talk to someone who knows about these programs if you need one. Absolutely. I did not see that. Thank you, Fran. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Talk to people who are in the system. I'm trying to get out there. I'm trying to get my name out there. There are hundreds of IEP coaches. There are hundreds that have gone through the mentorship like I have, and like my friend Linda did, that we can say that we are master IEP coaches. So find those people, reach out to those people. So on that note, again, Fran, this has been a joy. I so appreciate talking to you and visiting with you. And for those of you who are watching, if you like this video, please be sure to give it a like on Facebook or Instagram, or a thumbs up if you're watching it on the YouTube channel. If you're new to this and you haven't taken the plunge, please also like my page on Facebook or subscribe to the channel. Next week on Friday with Fran, we're going to discuss, as Fran calls it, pulling the disabled card. And what does that mean? On Tuesday, prior to that, I will be doing the next #NoLimits, and I'm going to be talking to an entrepreneur who has a learning disability and has had it all through school, and she is currently raising a child who has special needs. So you don't want to miss either one of these things. So make sure that you're getting the notifications of when I go live so that you can be part of these things. And everybody remember that together, we are making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Thanks, Fran.
Thank you.